I assumed my mother-in-law hurled that trash bag at me solely for humiliation. Yet when I unzipped it beneath the drenching porch, my fingers grazed a suffocatingly thick stack of cash, totaling $500,000. Buried beneath the money was a note scrawled in shaky script, warning me that they were framing me tonight. The final line froze my blood, because it revealed that the person opening the door for them was sitting right inside my company. My name is Harper Phillips, and the only sound in the room was the scratching of a pen that was signing away the last 7 years of my life. Outside, the Denver sky was a bruised purple, heavy with the kind of wet snow that sticks to your eyelashes and freezes your bones. Inside, the heating was on, but I had never felt colder. I sat at the glass dining table, the one I had picked out 3 years ago to celebrate our first real profit margin, and stared at the man who was currently erasing me. Graham Monroe sat across from me. He was not yelling. He was not throwing things. That would have been easier to handle because passion, even angry passion, implies some lingering connection. Instead, Graham was terrifyingly calm. He flipped the page of the divorce settlement with the precise, detached movement of a corporate auditor closing a failed account. "The house is in my name," he said, his voice smooth and devoid of any inflection. "The car is in my name. The accounts are under the family trust. You came into this marriage with nothing. Harper, you will leave with nothing." I looked at his hands. They were manicured. I remembered holding those hands when they were shaking before his first big pitch. Back when we were eating ramen and dreaming of a life like this. Now, those hands were pushing a pen toward me. "It is barely 8 o'clock. Graham," I whispered. My voice sounded thin, like paper tearing. "Can we not discuss this in the morning?" He did not answer. He did not have to. The sound of heels clicking against the hardwood floor announced her arrival before I even saw her. Sylvia Monroe drifted into the dining room like a cold front. My mother-in-law was wearing a silk robe that probably cost more than my first car, and her silver hair was perfectly coiffed, even at this hour. She stopped behind Graham, placing a hand on his shoulder. It was a tableau of unity, a fortress of two standing against the invader. "She is stalling," Sylvia said. She looked at me not with anger, but with the sort of mild irritation one feels when a stain refuses to come out of a favorite blouse. "You are being useless. Harper, just like always. Sign the papers." I gripped the edge of the table. The injustice of it rose in my throat, hot and bitter. "Useless?" I asked, my voice rising. "I paid off your medical debt. Sylvia, $40,000 for your heart surgery 3 years ago. I paid it from my personal savings. I helped Graham launch the consultancy firm. I covered the mortgage for the first 2 years while he built his client list." I looked from Sylvia to Graham, begging for a flicker of recognition, begging for him to acknowledge that I was not a parasite. "I carried us." I said to Graham, "When you had nothing?" Sylvia let out a short, dry sound. It was almost a laugh, but it lacked any humor. She walked around the table and leaned down, her face inches from mine. Her eyes were hard, flat surfaces. "Where's the proof?" she asked. I blinked. "What? Show me the paper trail," she said softly. "Show me the contract that says it was a loan. Show me the equity agreement. You paid those bills because you were a good wife. Harper, that is a gift, not an investment. Gifts are not refundable." I looked at Graham. He was checking his watch. "She is right," he said, bored. "You were just doing your duty. Now sign, or I call the police and have you removed for trespassing. This is not your house anymore." I felt the air leave my lungs. They had rewritten history. They had taken my sweat, my labor, and my love, and they had filed it away as nothing more than a wife's duty. I was not a partner. I was an appliance that had served its purpose and was now being discarded. I signed. My hand shook so badly that my signature looked like a seismograph of a catastrophe. But I signed. "Good," Graham said. He snatched the papers away before the ink was dry. He stood up, grabbed my arm, and pulled me toward the front door. He did not let me get my coat. He did not let me put on my boots. I stumbled, my socks slipping on the polished wood. He opened the heavy oak door and the winter night rushed in. Biting and aggressive, Graham shoved me. I stumbled down the front steps, my knees hitting the icy pavement. The cold was instantaneous, soaking through my thin sweater and jeans. I heard a thud behind me. My suitcase landed in the snow next to me. "Good luck." "Harper," Graham said. He sounded like he was wishing a stranger luck on a mild inconvenience, not banishing his wife into a blizzard. "Wait," I said, scrambling to stand up. "Graham, please, I have nowhere to go." The door slammed shut. The bolt slid home with a definitive, metallic permanence. I stood there, shivering, the snow melting against my hot skin. I was alone. The streetlights of Denver hummed overhead, casting long, indifferent shadows. My house glowed warmly from the inside, but I was on the outside now. Then the door opened again. For a second, hope flared. Maybe he had a conscience. Sylvia stepped out onto the porch. She was holding a black trash bag, the heavy-duty kind used for yard waste. She looked down at me, her face unreadable in the porch light. "You forgot this," she said. She swung the bag and threw it. It hit the wet concrete with a heavy, solid sound, sliding a few inches before coming to a rest against my shin. It did not sound like clothes. It did not sound like trash. She looked at me for 1 second longer, her expression masked in shadow, and then she turned and went inside. The lights on the porch flickered off, plunging me into darkness. I stared at the black plastic bag. Humiliation washed over me, hotter than the cold. She had thrown trash at me. I was garbage to them, something to be bagged up and left on the curb. I reached down to grab the handle of my suitcase, intending to leave the bag there. I wanted to walk away with whatever dignity I had left, but as I leaned over, I smelled it. It was faint, battling against the smell of wet asphalt and pine, but it was unmistakable. Lavender and bergamot. It was Sylvia's perfume. Why would a bag of trash smell like $80 an ounce perfume? I hesitated. My hands were numb, shaking from the cold and the shock. I reached out and touched the black plastic. It was cold and slick. I felt the knot at the top. It was tied tight, but not in a haphazard way. It was a precise, deliberate knot. I pulled at the plastic, tearing a small hole near the knot. I expected to see old clothes, maybe Graham's dirty laundry, maybe literal garbage, banana peels and coffee grounds. A final insult to the injury. I saw green. I froze. I ripped the hole wider. Inside the black trash bag, stacked in neat, vacuum-sealed bricks, was money. I gasped, looking around frantically to see if anyone was watching. The street was empty. The snow fell silently, covering everything in a white shroud. I dragged the bag and my suitcase into the shadow of the neighbor's hedge, out of the direct line of sight of the house. I unzipped the bag fully. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. It was cash. Hundreds. Stacks and stacks of hundreds. I did not need to count it to know it was a fortune, but the weight of it told me everything. $500,000. I knew this amount because it was exactly the liquidity Graham had claimed we lost in the bad investment last quarter. He had lied. He had hidden it. But why did Sylvia have it, and why did she throw it at me? I dug my hand deeper into the bag, my fingers numb and clumsy, beneath the bricks of cash. I felt hard plastic. I pulled it out. It was a cheap burner phone. Taped to the back of it was a piece of paper, folded into a tight square. I unfolded the paper. The handwriting was jagged, rushed. It looked nothing like Sylvia's usual elegant cursive. It looked like someone writing in the dark. "Do not call anyone." The note read, "Do not use your old phone. Do not go to your mother's house. They are hunting you tonight." I stared at the words, the ink slightly smeared from the moisture in the air. Hunting who was hunting me. I looked back at the house. It stood silent and imposing, a monument to the life I thought I had. But inside that bag, amidst the fortune that could send me to prison or set me free, lay the terrifying truth. This was not just a divorce. This was an execution, and I had just been handed the weapon to fight back. My phone buzzed in my pocket. My old phone. I ignored it. I looked at the burner phone in my hand. I turned it on. The screen lit up. casting a pale blue glow on the snow. There was one contact saved, no name, just a number. I looked at the note again. The snow was falling harder now, blurring the ink. I shoved the money, the note, and the new phone into my suitcase, zipping it shut over my wet clothes. I grabbed the handle and began to walk. I did not look back at the house. I walked into the dark, cold Denver night. A woman with nothing to her name but a bag of cash and a target on her back. I dragged my suitcase toward the nearest transit station, the wheels cutting uneven tracks through the slush. The physical cold was manageable, but the chill of memory was harder to shake. As I walked away from the wreckage of my marriage, my mind did not go to the arguments or the shouting matches, because there had been none. Instead, my mind drifted back to the smell of rubber mats and fresh paint. That was the scent of my life before it became a tragedy. That was the smell of Glassbird Fitness. I started that company with nothing but a certification and a terrifying amount of ambition. It began as a single, drafty room in a converted warehouse where the heating system rattled like a dying engine. I taught every class myself, 6 hours a day, 6 days a week. My body was perpetually sore, my voice constantly hoarse, but I was building something. Within 3 years, that drafty room had become 3 boutique locations across the city, each one sleek, modern, and highly profitable. Graham had been there at the start, or at least, the version of Graham I fell in love with had been there. He was the man who knew exactly what to say to make the exhaustion feel like a badge of honor. He would bring me takeout containers of pad thai at 10 at night when I was still scrubbing the studio floors. He would look around the empty gym and tell me that I was a visionary. He promised that we were building an empire together, brick by brick. Our wedding had been a reflection of that shared pragmatism. We did not have a lavish ceremony. There was no destination honeymoon or designer dress. Graham had held my hands over a dinner of grilled cheese and cheap wine and suggested we save the money. He said we should invest it in our future, in the business, in a home we could own outright one day. I thought he was being responsible. I thought he was making a sacrifice for our collective good. I looked at him and saw a partner who was willing to forego a party to secure our foundation. I was so blind. That blindness extended to his family. When Sylvia fell ill 3 years ago, the doctors were grave, and the bills were astronomical. Her insurance had gaps the size of canyons. I remember sitting in the hospital cafeteria, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, staring at a bill for $40,000. Graham had his head in his hands, weeping silently about losing his mother. I did not hesitate. I pulled out my checkbook and paid the balance. I did not ask for a repayment plan. I did not ask for a thank you. I just wanted to lift the weight off his shoulders. Then there was Tessa, his younger sister. She was impulsive and reckless, always chasing a lifestyle she could not afford. When she defaulted on her student loans and faced legal action, it was me who stepped in. I cleared her debt. Another $15,000 gone from my personal savings. Because Graham said we were family. He told me I was the best thing that had ever happened to the Monroes. He held me tight and said we were a team. But somewhere in the last 18 months, the man who brought me pad thai disappeared. It was subtle at first. He stopped asking about the studios. He stopped coming to the company holiday parties. He started coming home later and later, smelling of expensive scotch and vague excuses. The intimacy vanished, replaced by a polite, chilly distance. The most telling sign was his phone. In the early days, his phone was always tossed carelessly on the sofa or the counter, but recently, it became glued to his hand. When he set it down, it was always face down, always silent. If I walked into the room while he was texting, he would lock the screen immediately. When I asked him about it, he would sigh with the exhaustion of a man dealing with a petulant child. He called me paranoid. He told me I was projecting my work stress onto him. He made me feel like I was the one losing my grip on reality. Sylvia was no better. The Sunday dinners became torture sessions disguised as family meals. She would sit at the head of the table, cutting her roast beef with surgical precision, and make comments that were designed to bleed me dry. She would look at my tired eyes and say that I looked old. She would mention that a woman who spends all her time chasing money often forgets how to be a wife. She told me that I was excellent at building a business, but incompetent at keeping a man happy. Her voice never rose. She never sounded angry. She just sounded disappointed, which hurt far more. I took the criticism. I worked harder to be present. I tried to be the wife they wanted, and because I was so desperate to fix the cracks in our marriage, I let my guard down where it mattered most. The paperwork. It started as a casual conversation over breakfast. Graham suggested that we move the deed of the house into his name for tax purposes. He talked about liability shields and protecting the business assets from personal lawsuits. It sounded logical. He was in finance, after all. He used words like equity structures and risk mitigation. I was busy expanding to the third location, drowning in contractor disputes and permit applications. I did not have the bandwidth to argue. I trusted him. I signed the quitclaim deed. I signed the car title transfer. I signed document after document, believing I was securing our future, while in reality, I was signing my own eviction notice. I was the architect of my own downfall, but I was too busy working to see the demolition crew setting the charges. However, even in my blindness, something had snagged my attention last week. I was reviewing the quarterly budget for the downtown studio, usually a task I delegated, but my CFO had been out sick. I was scrolling through the expenses when I saw a recurring payment that I did not recognize. It was listed under consulting fees. The vendor name was unfamiliar, and the amount was significant: $5,000 a month, every month, for the past 6 months. I frowned at the screen. I knew every contract Glassbird Fitness held. I negotiated the lease terms, the equipment maintenance, and the cleaning crews. I did not remember hiring a high-level consultant. I had made a note to ask Graham about it, thinking perhaps he had recommended someone to help with branding, but then the divorce papers had landed on the table, and the question died in my throat. Now, walking through the snow with $500,000 in a trash bag. That memory resurfaced with violent clarity. That was not just a clerical error. That was a breadcrumb. I had been paying for something I did not receive, and if Graham had been setting this up for months, that mysterious consultant was not a stranger. It was a leak in the hull of my ship, and I had been too busy bailing water to notice who was drilling the hole. I reached the station and collapsed onto a metal bench. The cold metal bit through my jeans. I looked at the dark tunnel ahead. I had spent years paying their bills, cleaning up their messes, and building a fortune they felt entitled to steal. I had been a good wife. I had been a good daughter-in-law. And look where it got me. I pulled my coat tighter around myself. The sadness was beginning to fade, replaced by a low, steady burn in the pit of my stomach. They thought I was broken. They thought I was just a checkbook with a pulse. But they forgot one thing. I built Glassbird Fitness from a cold, empty room. I knew how to build things, but I also knew how to tear them down. And now, I had the blueprints. I could not go to my mother's house. That was the first place Graham would look if he decided to finish the job he started on the porch. Instead, I found myself standing in the narrow hallway of a third-floor walk-up on the east side of town. Jade Carter opened the door before I could knock a second time. She did not ask questions. She saw the suitcase, the wet hair, and the haunted look in my eyes, and she simply stepped aside to let me in. Jade was a graphic designer I had hired to do the logo for Glassbird Fitness back when I could barely afford to pay her in cash. I had overpaid her then because I believed in her talent. And later, when her laptop died right before a major deadline, I bought her a new one without expecting repayment. I never thought I would be cashing in that karma tonight. But as she locked the deadbolt behind me, I felt the first fraction of safety I had felt in hours. I did not sleep. I could not. While Jade made up the couch, I sat at her small kitchen table and opened my laptop. My hands were trembling, not from the cold anymore, but from the adrenaline that was now coursing through my system. I needed to know. I navigated to the admin portal for Glassbird Fitness. I typed in my credentials. The loading circle spun for 3 seconds, 3 seconds where I held my breath, terrified that my access had already been revoked. The dashboard popped up. Access granted. The numbers on the screen looked infuriatingly normal. the profit and loss statement for the month was green. Membership retention was holding steady at 88%. Payroll had gone out on time. To the untrained eye, it was a healthy business humming along perfectly. But I was not an untrained eye. I was the one who built the engine. I navigated to the accounts payable section. I set the filter to the last 6 months. My eyes scanned the rows of data, looking for the anomaly I had glimpsed earlier, but had been too distracted to investigate. There it was. Brand protection and consulting. The category itself was vague enough to pass a casual glance. Companies paid for consulting all the time, but the frequency was wrong. A legitimate consultant bills upon milestones or completion of a project. This vendor was billing on the first of every month, like a subscription, and the amounts were climbing. $5,000 in July, $6,500 in August, $8,000 in September. I clicked on the vendor name, Morrow Ridge Strategies, LLC. I opened a new tab in the browser and went to the Secretary of State Business search entity. I typed in the name. My finger hovered over the Enter key. I felt sick. A physical nausea that rose from my stomach to my throat. I pressed the key. The results loaded instantly. Morrow Ridge Strategies, LLC. Data formation. 7 months ago. Registered agent Graham Monroe. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. My husband was not just stealing from me. He was siphoning the lifeblood of my company into a shell corporation he had created specifically for this purpose. He had been planning this exit strategy for almost a year. Every time he kissed me goodbye in the morning, every time he sat across from me at dinner and complained about the market, he was actively draining my accounts. My burner phone buzzed against the hard wood of the table, making me jump. The sound was loud in the quiet apartment. I picked it up. A new text message from the unlisted number. They think you have nothing. Do not fix it yet. Let them reveal themselves. I read the text twice. It was Sylvia. It had to be. The tone was commanding, devoid of comfort, focused entirely on strategy. She knew I was looking. She knew I was online. How did she know? Was she watching Graham right now? Or did she know me well enough to know that the first thing I would do is hunt for the truth? Don't fix it yet. She wanted me to leave the wound open. She wanted me to let them keep bleeding the company. It went against every instinct I had as a business owner. My reflex was to freeze the accounts, to call the bank, to scream fraud. But Sylvia was telling me to wait. Why? I looked back at the screen. I needed to see the mechanism. Graham could create the fake invoices, but he could not approve them. Our internal controls were strict. Any payment over $2,000 required executive approval. Graham did not have signatory authority on the Glassbird operating accounts. I had never given it to him. So who approved the payments? I clicked on the September invoice for Morrow Ridge Strategies. I expanded the details to see the audit trail. Uploaded by system admin. Approved by M. Klein. The room seemed to tilt. I gripped the edge of the table. M. Klein. Megan Klein. Megan was my CFO. She was also my maid of honor. She was the one who held my hand when I had a miscarriage 4 years ago. She was the one who spent Thanksgiving with us because her family lived on the other coast. I trusted Megan with my life. I trusted her with my passwords. I trusted her with the keys to the kingdom. Approved by M. Klein. The betrayal was so sharp it felt like a physical blow to the chest. Graham was my husband, and marriages fail. But Megan was my sister in every way that mattered. She had looked me in the eye this morning and asked if I wanted coffee. She knew. She had been clicking the button that sent my money to my husband's secret account for months. I sat back, the air hissing out of my lungs. I was not just being divorced, I was being dismantled. They were not just taking the house, they were taking the business, the assets, and the entire support system I thought I had. My eyes fell on the black suitcase in the corner of Jade's living room. Inside was the trash bag. I closed my eyes and replayed the moment on the porch. I heard the sound of the bag hitting the concrete again. Thud. It had not sounded like a bag of clothes. It had not sounded like loose items tumbling together. It was a dense, singular impact. And the knot. I pictured the knot Sylvia had tied. It was a square knot. Tight. Secure. Suddenly, the image shifted. That bag was not trash. It was a package. The way Sylvia had thrown it, she aimed it. She threw it low, sliding it toward me, not at me. She threw it after Graham had turned his back to walk inside. The money inside was vacuum sealed. You do not vacuum seal cash on a whim. You do that when you are preparing for transport. You do that when you need to compress volume for a drop. Sylvia had not thrown me a lifeline out of pity. She had handed me a weapon. She had smuggled $500,000 out of her own son's grasp and delivered it to me under the guise of a final insult. Graham and Megan were running a long con, bleeding the company dry before discarding me. But Sylvia was playing a different game entirely. I looked at the screen again, at the name MKline next to the approval stamp. You want me to let them reveal themselves, I thought, staring at the glowing pixels. Fine. I reached for the burner phone and typed a single-word reply, my thumb hovering over the send button. I did not know if I could trust Sylvia, but I knew for a fact I could not trust anyone else. I deleted the draft. No paper trail. Not yet. I shut the laptop. The screen went black, leaving me in the dim light of Jade's kitchen. I was done crying. I was done being the victim standing in the snow. Tomorrow, I would walk back into Glassbird Fitness. I would look Megan in the eye. I would smile. And I would let them think they had won, while I sharpened the knife they had kindly provided for me. The text message arrived on the burner phone at exactly 9 o'clock in the morning. It was not a conversation. It was a set of coordinates and a 6-digit access code. I looked up the address. It was a high-rise commercial building in the financial district, a fortress of steel and glass that housed hedge funds and corporate law firms. This was not the kind of place Sylvia Monroe visited for tea. This was the kind of place where people signed non-disclosure agreements and buried bodies with paperwork. I left Jade's apartment wearing a baseball cap pulled low over my eyes and took a circuitous route, changing cabs twice just in case paranoia was actually prudence. When I arrived at the underground parking garage, I punched in the code at the pedestrian gate. The heavy steel door buzzed and clicked open. The air inside was cool and smelled of exhaust and damp concrete. It was quiet, the kind of heavy silence you only find in places built to insulate power from the noise of the street. I walked to the designated level, my footsteps echoing too loudly for my comfort. A black sedan was parked in the far corner, nestled between a structural pillar and the wall. The engine was off. As I approached, the rear door opened. Sylvia stepped out. She was wearing a trench coat belted tightly at the waist and sunglasses. Despite being 3 levels underground, she did not hug me. She did not offer a sympathetic smile. She looked at me with the critical assessment of a mechanic looking at a damaged engine, deciding if it was worth the cost of repair. You look like a fugitive, she said, her voice echoing slightly in the cavernous space. It does not suit you. I stopped 5 feet away from her. I felt the weight of the burner phone in my pocket. You told me to come here. I said, you told me they are hunting me. Sylvia took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were sharp, devoid of the fatigue that I felt dragging at my own bones. Tonight, she said, stepping closer, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. If you make one mistake tonight, Harper, if you let your emotion drive the car instead of your brain, they will pin everything on you. I frowned. What do you mean, everything they are stealing from me? Sylvia shook her head, a sharp, impatient gesture. You think this is just theft? Graham is greedy, but he is not stupid enough to just steal. He needs a scapegoat. She gestured to the car. The front passenger door opened, and a man stepped out. He was tall, wearing a charcoal suit that looked like it cost more than my first year's revenue. He had a briefcase in one hand and a face that gave away absolutely nothing. This is Miles Corbett, Sylvia said. He is with Corbett and Vale Legal. He is not your friend. He is your lawyer. And right now, he is the only thing standing between you and a federal indictment. I looked at Miles. He nodded once, a curt, professional greeting. Ms. Phillips, Miles said. His voice was a deep baritone, calm and terrifyingly steady. We do not have much time. Sylvia has briefed me on the situation regarding Glassbird Fitness and the unauthorized transfers to Morrow Ridge Strategies. I looked back at Sylvia. How do you know about Morrow Ridge? Sylvia let out a scoff. Did you think I was blind? Graham started buying things. A vintage watch. A deposit on a boat. He does not have that kind of liquidity. I started watching his accounts. I saw the transfers. I saw the patterns. He is washing money. Harper. But he is doing it clumsily. She stepped closer. Her perfume that same scent of lavender and bergamot from the trash bag filling the space between us. The $500,000 in that bag is not a severance package, she said, her voice hard. It is not an apology. It is a war chest. You need forensic accountants. You need data security experts. You need Miles. And none of them work for charity. That money is for you to survive the next 48 hours. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature of the garage. Sylvia had not given me the money to help me start over. She had given it to me because she knew I was walking into a firing squad. Miles opened his briefcase on the hood of the car. He pulled out a document. We need to file a preservation order immediately, Miles said. We will couch it in the language of a standard asset division dispute. We will claim that we need to freeze the servers to appraise the value of the company for the divorce settlement. Why, I asked. Because if we accuse them of fraud right now, they will shred everything, Miles replied. Looking up from the paper, we need to lock the doors before we tell them the house is on fire. This preservation order will force the hosting company to create a mirror image of your servers as they exist right now. It prevents deletion. It prevents alteration. I looked at the document. It seemed so dry, so bureaucratic. Will this stop them, I asked. Miles looked me in the eye. He did not blink. I cannot promise you that you will win. Ms. Phillips, the law is not about justice. It is about evidence. But I can promise you that if we do this, you will not be the one holding the smoking gun when the police arrive. I took the pen he offered. My hand hovered over the signature line. What are they planning? Sylvia, I asked, not looking up. You said they would pin it on me. How Sylvia's silence made me look up. She was looking at her son's lawyer, then back at me. For the first time, I saw a flicker of something that looked like hesitation in her eyes. It was gone in an instant, replaced by her usual steel. Graham is not just funneling money out, Sylvia said. He is creating a narrative. He has been planting emails in your outbox. He has been modifying the meeting minutes. I froze. What kind of emails? I whispered. Emails that show you authorizing the payments, Sylvia said. Emails that show you gambling. Emails that show you having a breakdown. They are building a profile of a woman who is unstable, addicted, and desperate. They are going to say that you embezzled the money to cover your personal debts, and that Graham and Megan only just discovered it. The air left my lungs. It was evil. It was pure, calculated evil. They were not just taking my money. They were taking my reputation, my sanity, and my freedom. They were going to send me to prison for the crime they were committing. Sylvia reached out and tapped the document on the hood of the car. Sign it, she commanded. Stop crying and sign it. You can cry when they are in handcuffs. Right now. You need to be a soldier. I looked at the paper. I thought of Graham's face when he handed me the divorce papers. I thought of Megan's fake sympathy. They thought I was weak. They thought I was already dead. I signed the paper. The scratch of the pen sounded like a gunshot in the quiet garage. Miles took the document back instantly, sliding it into a folder. I will file this within the hour, he said. Go back to your office. Do not confront them. Play the part, Ms. Phillips. Be the broken ex-wife. Let them get confident. Arrogance produces errors. Miles got back into the front seat of the car. Sylvia lingered for a moment. She looked at me, and for a second, the mask slipped. She looked tired. She looked like a mother who had realized her son was a monster, and she was the one who had to put him down. Why are you doing this? I asked her. You are betraying your own son. Sylvia tightened the belt of her trench coat. She looked away, toward the concrete ramp leading up to the light. Graham is a fool, she said softly. He thinks he can burn down the world and walk away clean. but he forgets who built the house he lives in. She turned her cold gaze back to me. I am not doing this for you. Harper, I am doing this because I will not let my family name be dragged through the mud of a federal prison because my son is too greedy to be smart. Do not make me regret this. She got into the car. The door slammed shut. The engine purred to life, and the black sedan glided away, leaving me standing alone in the exhaust fumes and the silence. I gripped the burner phone in my pocket. I had a lawyer. I had $500,000 in cash, and I knew the truth. I was not just fighting for my share of the business anymore. I was fighting for my life. I walked toward the exit ramp. I had a performance to give. If they wanted a broken woman, I would give them the best performance of my life. I would walk into that office. I would cry. I would beg. And all the while, I would be waiting for the trap to snap shut. I walked into the lobby of Glassbird Fitness at 10 o'clock sharp. I had spent the previous hour in the bathroom of a coffee shop down the street, scrubbing my face until it was raw and using a terrifying amount of saline drops to make my eyes look swollen and irritated. I needed to look like a woman who had spent the last 24 hours crying on the floor. I needed to look like a victim. The receptionist, a sweet college student named Chloe, stopped typing the moment she saw me. Her eyes widened, darting to my unkempt hair and the oversized sweater I wore to hide the tension in my shoulders. The office rumor mill moved faster than fiber optics. They all knew. They knew Graham had filed. They knew I was out. I kept my head down, clutching a crumpled tissue in my hand like a talisman of defeat. I walked past the spin studio, where the bass of the music thumped against the glass, and headed straight for the administrative offices in the back. Megan Klein was already there. She was standing by the coffee machine, holding a mug that said Boss Lady. When she saw me, her expression shifted with a speed that was almost impressive. She went from casual boredom to devastating concern in less than a second. Harper, she breathed, setting the mug down with a clatter. She rushed over and enveloped me in a hug. Her perfume was cloying, a floral scent that suddenly made me want to gag. I felt her hand rub my back in slow, rhythmic circles. It was the touch of a sister. Or at least, that is what I would have thought 2 days ago. Now, it felt like the touch of a butcher checking the quality of the meat before the slaughter. I am so sorry, she whispered into my ear. Graham called me. I cannot believe he actually did it. I pulled away, keeping my eyes averted. I sniffled, a sound I had practiced in the mirror. I do not know what to do. Megan, I said, my voice trembling. He wants me to sign everything over. He said I have nothing. I just came in to look at the numbers. I need to understand what is happening before I agree to anything. Megan stiffened. It was subtle, a tiny locking of her jaw. But I saw it. You should not be here, she said, her voice dropping to a soothing coo. You are in shock. You do not need to be staring at spreadsheets right now. You need rest. You need wine and bad movies. I shook my head weakly. I have to check the accounts. Megan, the lawyers need the profit and loss statements for the asset division. Megan took my hand. Her palms were cool. Let me do it, she said. I am the CFO. Harper, that is my job. You go home. Go to your mom's house. I will pull all the reports. I will make sure everything is categorized perfectly for the divorce lawyers. You do not need to stress yourself out with the minutiae. I looked at her. I looked deep into the eyes of the woman who had stood beside me at the altar. I saw the calculation there. She did not want to help me. She wanted to control the narrative. If I looked at the books, I might see the holes. If she did it, she could patch them over with creative accounting before handing me the sanitized version. I let my shoulders slump. I let out a long, ragged sigh of surrender. Maybe you are right, I said. I cannot focus. My head is pounding. Megan squeezed my hand. I am always right. Go. I will email you everything by the end of the day. Thank you, I whispered. You are the only one I can trust. I saw a flicker of triumph in her eyes. It was quick, predatory, and disgusting. Always, she said. I walked to my office, not to pack, but to grab my personal laptop. I kept the act up until I closed the door. Then, my posture straightened. I sat down at my desk and pulled out the burner phone. I sent a text to Miles. She took the bait. She is accessing the system now. I waited. A moment later, a reply came. We are live. Every keystroke is being mirrored. Do not interrupt her. I opened my laptop, but I did not log into the company server directly. Instead, I logged into the secure remote viewing portal Miles's team had set up an hour ago. It was a ghost window. I could see exactly what was happening on the main server without anyone knowing I was watching. I watched as Megan's user ID logged into the accounting software. I watched as she bypassed the standard reporting tools and went straight to the general ledger. She began moving entries. She was reclassifying the payments to Morrow Ridge Strategies. She was changing them from consulting fees to marketing expenses and equipment maintenance. She was trying to bury the bodies in categories that looked legitimate. She was scrubbing the crime scene, and she was doing it while I sat 20 feet away. Now, I had to trigger the next phase. I opened my personal email. I composed a message to Graham. Miles had dictated the wording to me earlier. It had to sound defeated. It had to sound like I was broken enough to give up. Subject: I am done. Graham, I cannot fight you. I do not have the money or the energy. I will sign the papers as they are. I just want this to end. Please, just let me move on. I will be out of the office by noon. I hit send. I stared at the screen, my heart beating a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I was gambling everything on the fact that Graham's greed was stronger than his caution. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Then, the ghost window on my screen flickered. A new user had logged in. It was not Megan. It was the administrative account Graham used remotely. He had received my email. He thought I had folded. He thought the threat was gone. Suddenly, the activity on the server spiked. I watched in horror and fascination as a request for a wire transfer was initiated. It was not for $5,000. It was not for $10,000. It was for $120,000. Graham was emptying the operating account. He was taking the cash reserves we kept for payroll and emergency repairs. He was cashing out. He was confident that I was too weak to stop him and too stupid to notice. I watched the progress bar. Authorized by M. Klein. Approved. The money vanished from the Glassbird account and reappeared in the ledger for Morrow Ridge Strategies. They were looting the ship before scuttling it. My burner phone buzzed again. It was Sylvia. They are preparing a public stage. The text read, "When people are confident, they talk more. Check the marketing drive." I frowned. The marketing drive. Why would they be looking at marketing? I minimized the ghost window and accessed the shared company drive. I navigated to the folder labeled PR and Communications. There was a new subfolder created just this morning. It was titled Exit Narrative. My hands went cold. I clicked on it. Inside was a Word document. I opened it. It was a press release, but it was not about a change in management. It was a character assassination. Glassbird Fitness announces restructuring following leadership crisis. The headline read. I scrolled down, reading the text with a growing sense of nausea. Ms. Phillips has stepped down from her role as CEO to focus on her mental health. Internal audit revealed financial irregularities linked to personal gambling debts. Unstable behavior in the workplace. Mr. Monroe will be assuming full control to stabilize the brand. I covered my mouth to stop the gasp that wanted to escape. They were not just going to divorce me. They were going to destroy me. They were painting me as an addict and a thief. They were going to use this narrative to explain where the missing money went. They were going to say I stole it, and Graham was the hero stepping in to save the company from his crazy wife. I looked through the glass wall of my office. I could see Megan down the hall. She was typing furiously, occasionally stopping to sip her coffee. She looked so normal. She looked so professional. She was currently drafting the email that would ruin my life. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, but this time, it was not part of the act. It was pure, distilled rage. They had taken my love. They had taken my trust. And now they wanted to take my name. I looked back at the screen, at the transfer log that showed Graham stealing over $100,000 in real time. and at the document that blamed me for it, I saved a copy of the exit narrative to an external hard drive. I took a screenshot of the transfer log. I wiped my face. The sadness was gone. The shock was gone. You want a narrative, I thought. Staring at Megan's back, I will give you a story, but you are not going to like the ending. I stood up, grabbed my laptop, and walked out of the office. I passed Megan's desk. She looked up, her face arranging itself into that mask of pity again. Leaving already, she asked softly. I looked at her. I forced the corners of my mouth to tremble. I cannot be here, Megan, I said, my voice cracking perfectly. It is too much. Do whatever you need to do. I will, she said. Take care of yourself. Harper. I walked out the door and into the cold air. The wind dried the fake tears on my face instantly. I hailed a cab. Drive, I told the driver. Where to, he asked. I gave him the address of Miles Corbett's office. I have a crime to report. I whispered to the window, watching the city blur past, and I have the receipts. I stormed into the office of Corbett and Vale Legal, my heart still racing from the performance I had just delivered at Glassbird Fitness. I expected Miles to be pleased with the screenshot I had secured of the transfer log, or at least satisfied that I had successfully played the role of the defeated wife. Instead, I found him pacing behind his desk, his face a mask of grim determination. Sylvia was already there, sitting in a leather armchair by the window, looking out at the city skyline with a stillness that was unnerving. Sit down. Harper, Miles said. He did not offer me water. He did not ask how it went. I sat. The leather crunched beneath me, the only sound in the tense room. We have a problem, Miles stated flatly. He slid a piece of paper across the mahogany desk. It was a printout of an email. I picked it up. The header showed it had been sent to the state tax board and the local district attorney's office. The sender was anonymous, a string of random characters from an encrypted server. The subject line read, Whistleblower complaint regarding embezzlement at Glassbird Fitness. I scanned the body of the text. My breath hitched. It was a detailed, meticulously crafted accusation claiming that I, Harper Phillips, had been systematically siphoning company funds to support a gambling addiction. It cited specific dates. It mentioned the exact amounts that Graham had just stolen. This was sent 2 hours ago, Miles said, his voice low, before you even arrived at your office to act out your scene. I looked up at him, the paper trembling in my hand. I do not gamble, I said, my voice rising in panic. I have never gambled in my life. This is a lie. It does not matter if it is a lie, Sylvia said from the window. She turned to face us. Her face was pale, her lips pressed into a thin line. It only matters that it triggers an investigation. Once the authorities open a case, your assets are frozen. You cannot touch your bank accounts. You cannot sell your share of the business. You cannot even pay a lawyer to defend you. I felt the blood drain from my face. I had thought Graham just wanted the money. I thought he wanted the house and the business. I was wrong. He does not just want a divorce, I whispered, the realization settling over me like a shroud. He wants to destroy me. He wants to make sure I can never build another company. He wants to put me in prison. Sylvia walked over to the desk. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small digital voice recorder. She placed it on the desk next to the anonymous email. You need to hear this, she said. I recorded this 3 days ago. Graham left his phone on the kitchen island while he was in the shower. He took a call on speaker. She pressed play. The audio was grainy at first, the sound of running water in the background, but then the voices became sharp and clear. We cannot just fire her, Graham's voice said. If we fire her, she sues. If she sues, Discovery will find the shell company. Then we make her toxic, a female voice replied. It was Megan. Her tone was brisk, efficient, the same tone she used when discussing quarterly projections. We create a paper trail. I will adjust the ledger entries to look like cash withdrawals. We say she is unstable. We say she has been acting erratically. By the time she realizes what is happening, she will be too busy fighting a felony charge to look at our books. Make her look like a thief, Graham said. Then we are the victims. Then we are clean. The recording clicked off. Silence stretched in the room. heavy and suffocating. I stared at the device. I had heard the words, but my brain refused to process them. Megan, my friend, the woman who had held my hand through my darkest days, was not just an accomplice. She was the architect. She was the one suggesting the frame-up. She was the one building my cage. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to grip the arms of the chair to keep from doubling over. The betrayal was absolute. There was no misunderstanding here. There was only malice. "They are not just stealing my money," I said, my voice shaking with a rage that was finally eclipsing the fear. "They are stealing my life." Miles leaned forward, his elbows on the desk. "Exactly," he said. "This is not a civil dispute anymore, Harper. This is a criminal conspiracy, and right now, they are winning. They have the narrative. They have the documentation. And as soon as that anonymous tip gets processed, they will have the law on their side." I looked at the trash bag I had dragged into the office. It sat in the corner, innocuous and ugly. "We need to change the game," I said. I stood up and walked over to the bag. I unzipped it. The smell of cold cash filled the room. I grabbed a stack of bills, then another. I threw them onto Miles's desk. $500,000. I said, "Use it. I want the best forensic accounting team in the country. I want a digital security firm that can rip their server apart and find the original metadata before Megan scrubbed it. I want to know every keystroke she made in the last 6 months." Miles looked at the money, then at me. He nodded slowly. "That will get us the evidence," he said. "But it might not be fast enough. We need to catch them in the act. We need them to make a mistake." Sylvia stepped forward. She reached out and picked up one of the stacks of $100 bills. She ran her thumb over the edge of the paper. "They will make a mistake," she said softly, "because we are going to give them exactly what they want." She looked at me, her eyes gleaming with a dangerous intelligence. "This money," she said, holding up the stack, "I did not just withdraw it from the family safe before I put it in that bag. I treated it, I asked. I dusted the edges of every stack with a chemical marker." Sylvia explained, "It is invisible to the naked eye. It does not wash off easily, and it reacts under a specific wavelength of ultraviolet light." I frowned, not understanding. "But I have the money." I said, "Graham does not have it. How does that help us?" "Because we are going to use it as bait," Sylvia said. "We are going to let slip that you have a significant amount of cash that you supposedly embezzled. We are going to make them think that this money is the missing piece of evidence they need to nail your coffin shut." Miles smiled, a sharp, shark-like expression. "If they come for the money," he said, picking up the thread, "they prove they know about it, and if they touch it, they mark themselves." Sylvia finished. I looked at the money on the desk. It was no longer just currency, it was a radioactive isotope. I pulled out my burner phone. "Megan is expecting me to disappear." I said, "She thinks I'm hiding." "Then let's give her a location." Miles said, "We will set a trap. We will use a portion of this cash to lure them out. We make them think they are recovering stolen company property, but when they grab it, they are actually putting their fingerprints on a felony." I looked at the two of them, my mother-in-law, who had hated me for years, and a lawyer I had met 2 hours ago. They were my army. "Let's do it," I said. I took $20,000 from the pile and shoved it into my purse. "I'm going to make a drop," I said, "and I'm going to make sure Megan knows exactly where to find it." Sylvia nodded. "Be careful." "Harper," she warned, "when a rat is cornered, it bites. But when a rat thinks it sees cheese, it runs straight into the trap." I zipped up the bag. I was done being the victim. I was done crying. Tonight, I was going hunting. 3 days after I was thrown out of my own house, my husband threw a party. It was not just a dinner, it was a coronation. The invitation, which Miles had intercepted, called it the Morrow Ridge Gala. It was being held in the Grand Ballroom of the Four Seasons, a venue that cost $50,000 just to unlock the doors. The theme was A New Horizon, which was a poetic way of saying that Graham was publicly erasing me and claiming my empire as his own discovery. I sat in a hotel suite 3 floors above the ballroom, watching the live stream feed on a tablet. The room was dark, lit only by the screen and the city lights outside. Downstairs, the air was filled with the scent of expensive lilies and roasting beef. Upstairs, the air smelled of stale coffee and printer toner. On the screen, I saw the world I had built. There were the investors I had wooed for years, holding flutes of champagne and laughing at Graham's jokes. There were the fitness influencers and local celebrities Megan had curated, their presence validating Graham's lie. They were the chorus in his tragedy, unknowingly singing my eulogy while eating canapés paid for with stolen money. Megan was working the room with the efficiency of a politician. She wore a red dress that was cut too low and cost too much, likely charged to the marketing expenses account she had falsified last week. She was smiling, touching arms, whispering confidences. She was cementing the story. I could almost hear the whispers. Poor Harper. She just cracked. Graham is a saint for keeping the business afloat. My phone remained silent. I had gone dark. No frantic Facebook posts defending myself. No tearful Instagram stories. No angry texts to mutual friends, to the world. I had vanished. My silence was the canvas upon which they painted their masterpiece of lies. They interpreted my lack of response as guilt, or perhaps shame. They thought they had crushed me so completely that I could not even muster a squeak of protest. They did not know that silence is not always surrender. Sometimes, it is the sound of a predator holding its breath. Behind me, the printer whirred, spitting out the final pages of the dossier Miles had assembled. It was a beautiful, lethal stack of paper. We had everything. The forensic accountants I had hired with the cash from the trash bag had worked for 48 hours straight. They had traced the digital footprints Megan thought she had scrubbed. Miles picked up the stack, tapping it against the desk to straighten the edges. "This is the kill shot," he said, his voice devoid of hype. "We have the original IP logs showing the transfer requests originating from Graham's laptop. We have the edit history where Megan renamed the vendor payments. We have the fake consulting contract signed by Graham on behalf of Morrow Ridge and by Graham on behalf of Glassbird. He literally signed both sides of the deal. It is clumsy, arrogant, and undeniably illegal." I looked at the documents. It was my vindication in black and white. But paper alone was not enough. If we just filed a lawsuit, they would drag it out for years. They would use the company's money to fight me. I needed to end this tonight. I needed to cut the head off the snake in front of the entire village. The door to the suite opened. Sylvia walked in. She was dressed for war, though to anyone else, it looked like she was dressed for a gala. She wore a floor-length gown of midnight blue velvet and a diamond necklace that I recognized as a family heirloom. Her hair was perfect. Her makeup was flawless. She looked like the matriarch of a dynasty, regal and untouchable. She walked over to the window and looked down at the street, where limousines were still arriving. "They are all there," she said. "The mayor is there. The bank representatives are there. Graham has assembled a jury of his peers." She turned to face me. Her expression was unreadable. "I am going down there now," she announced. I nodded. "Good. You need to be in position when we make our move." Sylvia shook her head slowly. "No. Harper, you do not understand. I am not going down there to sit in the corner. I am going down there to stand next to Graham." I felt a cold spike in my chest. I looked at Miles, then back at Sylvia. "What I asked. I will stand on their side," Sylvia said, her voice steady and cold. "I will toast to his success. I will hug Megan. I will tell the investors how proud I am of my son for weathering this difficult storm with his unstable wife." I stood up, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. Why I demanded, my voice cracking. "After everything we have done, you are going to validate him. You are going to give him your seal of approval." Sylvia walked up to me. She did not flinch at my anger. She placed her hands on my shoulders. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "Listen to me," she hissed. "If I walk in there and look hostile, they will put their guards up. They will check their phones. They will watch the exits. I need them to feel safe. I need them to believe, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that they have won." She squeezed my shoulders. When a man feels invincible, he stops looking over his shoulder. She said, I will make Graham feel like a king. I will feed his ego until he is drunk on it. And when he is standing on that stage, feeling the safest he has ever felt, that is when you will take his legs out from under him. I stared at her. It was brutal. It was manipulative. And it was brilliant. I need them to believe they have won. She repeated. I took a deep breath and nodded. I understood. She was going into the belly of the beast to lull it to sleep. Go, I said. Make him feel like a god. Sylvia released me. She smoothed the front of her velvet dress. I will see you on the battlefield, she said. She swept out of the room, leaving a trail of expensive perfume and cold resolve. Miles checked his watch. We have 20 minutes before the keynote speech, he said. My source inside says that is when Graham plans to drop the hammer. What hammer? I asked. The rebranding Miles shook his head. He pulled up an email on his tablet and showed it to me. It was a leaked draft of the speech Graham was currently rehearsing. He is going to announce that you have voluntarily withdrawn from ownership, Miles said. He has a document prepared. He is going to tell everyone that you signed over your shares this afternoon in exchange for a settlement to pay off your gambling debts. I felt the blood pound in my ears. It was a lie so big it was breathtaking. If he announced that publicly, and I was not there to deny it, the market would accept it as fact. By the time I fought it in court, the company would be his. He was trying to seal the tomb while I was still breathing. He is trying to lock the door, I whispered. He is, Miles agreed. He thinks you are hiding in a motel room, crying over your lost life. He thinks the stage is his. I looked at the black dress hanging on the back of the bathroom door. It was simple, sharp, and severe. It was not a party dress. It was a business suit disguised as evening wear. I walked over and took it off the hanger. He wants a withdrawal, I said. Feeling the adrenaline sharpen my vision, I will give him a withdrawal. I am going to withdraw every lie he has ever told and shove it down his throat. I turned to Miles. Get the folder ready, I said. We are not just crashing a party. We are conducting a hostile takeover. Miles grinned. It was the first time I had seen him smile with genuine pleasure. The car is waiting downstairs. Ms. Phillips. I dressed in silence. I did not look at the mirror to check my makeup. I did not care if I looked pretty. I needed to look like the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company who had just caught her employees stealing from the till. I walked to the elevator. The descent took 30 seconds. 30 seconds to prepare myself to walk into a room full of people who thought I was crazy, led by a man who thought I was dead. The doors opened. The noise of the gala washed over me, the clinking of crystal, the murmur of voices, the string quartet playing something cheerful and light. I stepped into the hallway. I could see the double doors of the ballroom ahead. They were closed. I adjusted the folder under my arm. Inside was the evidence that would burn their world to the ground. Let's go, I said to Miles. We walked toward the light. Before I stepped into the elevator to crash my husband's victory party, I had to go back to the beginning. I had to go back to the trash bag. It was sitting in the corner of the hotel suite, empty now that the cash had been removed. A crumpled heap of black plastic. To anyone else, it was garbage. To me, it had been a lifeline. But something about it had been nagging at me since I first touched it on the porch. The weight had been uneven. The texture at the bottom felt too rigid for just layers of polyethylene. I knelt on the plush carpet of the hotel room, still wearing my bathrobe, and pulled the bag toward me. I turned it inside out. The construction was high-end, the kind of heavy-duty bag used by contractors, but along the bottom seam, there was a discrepancy. The heat seal was double-layered. It looked standard to the naked eye, but when I ran my fingernail along the ridge, I felt a slight separation. It was not a manufacturing defect. It was a pocket. I grabbed a pair of scissors from the hotel desk and carefully snipped the thread. I peeled back the layer of plastic. Inside the false bottom, sandwiched between the liners, was not more money. It was a thin manila envelope. Clipped to the front of it was a small, dusty pink velvet bow. I stared at the bow. My breath caught in my throat. It was not just a decoration. It was a memory. 6 years ago, when I launched the first Glassbird location. I had wrapped the ceremonial scissors in a ribbon of this exact shade and texture. Graham had laughed at me for saving the scraps. Sylvia had been there, watching from the back, silent. I thought she was judging my sentimentality. Now I realized she had been cataloging it. She had kept this scrap for 6 years. It was a marker. It was her way of saying that what was inside this envelope belonged to the girl who cut that ribbon. I unclipped the bow and opened the envelope. Inside was a single document, a photocopy of a deed of incorporation for a holding company called Janus Ventures. I scanned the legalese. Janus Ventures was the parent company Graham had set up to funnel the profits from Morrow Ridge Strategies. It was the top of his pyramid, the safe haven where he planned to stash the money he stole from me. He had told me once, vaguely, that Janus was his family's legacy trust, something untouchable. I read the fine print on the second page. Primary beneficiary Harper Phillips. I froze. I read it again. The controlling trustee was Sylvia Monroe, but the irrevocable beneficiary of all assets held by Janus Ventures was not Graham. It was me. I sat back on my heels, the paper shaking in my hands. Graham had built a complex financial getaway car. He had set up shell companies, routed payments, and laundered money, believing he was hiding it in a vault only he and his mother could access. He thought he was using Sylvia as a rubber stamp. He thought she was just the old woman who signed where he pointed. He was wrong. Sylvia had quietly, legally, swapped the names. Every dollar Graham stole from Glassbird Fitness and moved into his secret company effectively became my money again the moment it hit the account. He was not stealing from me. He was just moving my money from my left pocket to my right pocket without realizing it. I looked at the handwritten note again, the one I had found with the cash. Don't call anyone. Don't use your old phone. They are trying to make you a criminal tonight. I had read it as a frantic warning. Now, with the document in my hand, I saw it for what it truly was. It was an instruction manual. Sylvia knew Graham's plan. She knew he was going to frame me. If I had stayed in the house, if I had fought back immediately, or if I had called the police that night, Graham would have destroyed the evidence or accelerated the transfer. The trash bag was not an impulsive act of cruelty. It was a prearranged signal. Sylvia must have decided long ago that if she ever threw this specific bag at me, it meant the trap was set. It meant she had secured the legal leverage, and I needed to run to safety until the trap could be sprung. The realization washed over me, cold and clarifying. The humiliation on the porch, the way she looked at me like I was dirt, it was all theater. If she had handed me a suitcase and whispered "run," Graham would have known something was wrong. He would have checked the bag. But a mother-in-law throwing trash at her despised daughter-in-law. That fit the narrative perfectly. Graham never checked the bag because he saw exactly what he expected to see. Sylvia was not just a wealthy widow protecting her assets. She was the executioner. She held the legal trigger that could dissolve Graham's entire defense. She did not need to testify against him. She just needed to file one piece of paper declaring that Janus Ventures and all the stolen money inside it belonged to me. But there was a darker implication here. Sylvia had watched Graham steal from me for months. She had let him do it. She had signed the papers that allowed him to set up the shell company. She had waited until the account held over $500,000 before she acted. Why? Because she needed the crime to be complete. Attempted embezzlement was hard to prove. Actual, completed embezzlement of hundreds of thousands of dollars was a felony that carried a mandatory prison sentence. She had used me as bait. She had let me suffer the stress, the gaslighting, and the heartbreak of a failing marriage so that Graham would feel comfortable enough to commit a crime big enough to bury him. I felt a complicated mix of admiration and horror. Sylvia Monroe was saving me. Yes, but she was also terrifying. She played the long game with a patience that was almost reptilian. I stood up, clutching the document. I walked over to the mirror and looked at myself. The fear was gone. The confusion was gone. I finally understood the rules of the game I was playing. I tucked the document into the leather folder Miles had prepared. I placed the pink velvet bow in my pocket. I trusted Sylvia's plan. The logic was sound. The trap was perfect. But trust Sylvia, the person. I looked at my reflection, seeing the lines of exhaustion around my eyes that she had allowed to happen. No, I would work with her. I would let her help me destroy her son, but I would never turn my back on her. A woman who can watch her own child walk into a wood chipper without blinking is a woman you keep in your line of sight. I finished buttoning my dress. It was time to go downstairs. Graham was waiting for his applause. I was going to give him an eviction notice. The digital clock on the hotel nightstand flipped to 6:45 in the evening. The gala was scheduled to begin in 15 minutes. I was standing by the window, watching the stream of luxury cars depositing Graham's victims at the front door, when Miles's phone shattered the silence. He answered it on the first ring, listened for 3 seconds, and then hung up. His face, usually a mask of professional detachment, tightened. "We have a breach," Miles said, moving quickly to his laptop. My contact in private security just flagged a query on the police database. Someone ran a trace on Jade Carter's license plate. They tracked her car to the parking garage of this hotel. I felt a cold spike of adrenaline. Graham was not just waiting for me to disappear. He was actively hunting me. He knew I was not at my mother's house. He knew I was not at a shelter. He had hired professionals to find the one person I had contacted. "They are looking for you," Miles said, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "If they find you before you get to that ballroom, they will not arrest you. They will detain you. They will create a scene in the lobby, claim you are having a mental health crisis, and have you removed by security before you can say a word. It will validate their entire story." I grabbed my purse. "Then we need to go now." "Wait," Miles commanded. He did not look up from the screen. I stopped. "Wait, you just said they are coming. Look at this," Miles said, pointing at the monitor. I leaned over his shoulder. The ghost window into the Glassbird fitness server was open. For the last hour, it had been dormant. Now, it was flashing red. "Megan is logged in," Miles said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "She is accessing the archival backup." I squinted at the command lines scrolling down the screen. Delete, purge, overwrite. "She is trying to wipe the history," I said. "She knows I might have access. She is destroying the evidence." "No," Miles said, a savage grin touching the corners of his mouth. "She is trying to destroy the evidence, but she does not know we already mirrored the drive this morning. What she is doing right now is not cleaning up. It is digital arson, and we are recording every match she strikes." He picked up his phone and dialed a number. "Judge Vance, please. This is Miles Corbett." "Yes, it is an emergency. We have an active spoliation of evidence occurring in real time regarding the Monroe case. I need an immediate injunction to freeze the server logs." "Yes, I have the IP address. Thank you." He hung up and looked at me. "Let her finish," he said. I stared at the screen. I watched as Megan, my former best friend, systematically selected the files that proved my innocence, the true profit margins, the vendor contracts, the emails where I asked about the budget and dragged them into the trash. She was erasing my legacy. She was deleting the proof that I was a competent CEO so she could replace it with the fiction of a gambling addict. It hurt. It physically hurt to watch. But Miles was right. By trying to delete the files, she was proving she knew they existed. She was proving intent to conceal. She was signing her own confession with every click of the mouse. My burner phone buzzed. I picked it up. It was Sylvia. "Do not come early." The text read, "Do not speak first. Let them speak." I frowned. "Sylvia, they are outside the door. They are looking for me," I typed back frantically. "They know I am here. If I wait, they might stop me." The response was immediate. "If you interrupt him, you look like a heckler. If you let him finish his lie, and then you walk in, you are the truth arriving. Hold your ground." I looked at the door of the hotel suite. I could almost hear the heavy footsteps of Graham's private security team coming down the hall. I was trapped between a hammer and an anvil. If I went down now, I walked into a trap. If I stayed, I risked being cornered. "I need to call Jade," I said. I dialed her number. She answered on the second ring. She sounded winded, like she was walking fast. "Harper," she said. "Jade, they are tracking your car." I said. They know I'm at the hotel. You need to leave. I know, Jade said. I saw a guy in a gray suit taking pictures of my license plate. I am already in a cab. I left my car there as a decoy. I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. Jade was safe. Harper, listen to me, Jade said, her voice cutting through the static. I know you are scared. I know you want to run down there and scream at them, but do not do it. Why, I asked, pacing the small room. Because you do not need to scream to be right, Jade said. Her voice was fierce, the voice of the friend who had helped me paint the walls of my first studio until 3 a.m. You just need to stand there when the truth turns on the lights. Let them build their tower. Harper, it will make the crash so much louder. I ended the call. The room was silent except for the hum of the server cooling fans. I looked at Miles. Is the injunction filed? I asked. It is processing, he said. The moment the judge signs it, any further deletion becomes a contempt of court charge. Megan is digging a hole so deep, she will never see the sun again. I walked to the bathroom mirror. I looked at the woman staring back. I had spent the last 3 days crying, hiding, and running. I was done. I stripped off the hotel robe. I put on the dress I had chosen. It was not a gown. It was a black sheath dress, tailored and sharp as a knife blade. No jewelry, no frantic makeup to hide the stress. I pulled my hair back into a severe, tight bun. I looked like I was going to a board meeting, not a gala. I walked back into the main room. I picked up the 3 things I needed. First, the burner phone, which held the text messages from Sylvia and the recording of Graham. Second, the sealed folder containing the Janus Ventures deed and the forensic accounting report. Third, my composure. I wrapped it around myself like armor. I am ready, I said. Miles closed his laptop. He checked the hallway through the peephole. The coast is clear for now, he said. The security team is likely sweeping the lower floors first. We take the service elevator. It comes out right behind the kitchen, 20 feet from the ballroom entrance. We left the room. The hallway was empty, stretching out long and quiet. My heels made no sound on the thick carpet. We entered the service elevator. It smelled of industrial cleaner and stale food. As the numbers counted down 10, 9, 8. I felt a strange calm settle over me. I was not Harper the victim anymore. I was not Harper the rejected wife. I was the majority shareholder. I was the CEO, and I was about to fire my husband in front of 500 people. The elevator jolted to a stop on the ground floor. The doors slid open. The noise of the gala hit us instantly. It was a roar of conversation, laughter, and clinking glass. It sounded like a celebration. It sounded like a victory. I stepped out of the elevator. I adjusted the folder in my arm. Let them speak, Sylvia had said. Fine. I would let them speak. I would let Graham tell his story. I would let him stack every single lie on top of the other until the structure was towering and unstable. And then, I would pull the bottom brick. The ballroom of the Four Seasons was a kaleidoscope of crystal chandeliers, champagne flutes, and expensive lies. From the shadows of the service entrance, I watched Graham standing on the stage. He looked magnificent. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit him like a second skin. His hair perfectly swept back, his smile radiating the kind of confident benevolence that only a sociopath can maintain while destroying his wife. Megan stood slightly behind him to his left, clutching a tablet like a shield. She nodded solemnly at the appropriate moments, playing the role of the loyal executive holding the fort. And then there was Sylvia. My mother-in-law stood to Graham's right. She was beaming. She looked at him with such adoration that for a split second, I felt a flicker of doubt. Was she playing me? Had this whole thing been a double cross to flush me out? Graham tapped the microphone. The room fell silent. Thank you all for coming, Graham said, his voice dropping to a somber, intimate register. This has been a difficult week for the Glassbird family. As many of you know, my wife, Harper, has been struggling for some time. We tried to keep her battles private. We tried to help her, but addiction is a terrible disease. A murmur of sympathy rippled through the crowd. I saw heads nodding. They bought it. They believed him because he was handsome and charming, and because the lie was easier to digest than the truth. Graham sighed, looking down at his podium. It breaks my heart to announce that Harper has voluntarily withdrawn from the company to seek the treatment she desperately needs. He continued, She has signed over full control of Glassbird Fitness to me. It is a heavy burden, but one I will carry to protect our legacy. He picked up a gold pen. A document lay on the podium. The press was ready to capture the moment he signed the declaration that would legally cement his theft. But before the pen touched the paper, Sylvia stepped forward. She placed her hand over the document. Graham looked up, surprised, but he quickly recovered, smiling at his mother. My mother, ladies and gentlemen, Graham said, the rock of our family. Sylvia leaned into the microphone. Her voice was clear, sharp, and cold as ice. I am so proud of what my son has built, Sylvia said. She looked out at the audience, her eyes scanning the room until they found the service entrance where she knew I was waiting. And because I am so proud, I have prepared a final gift for him tonight, a retrospective of his true work. Graham looked confused. This was not in the script. He tried to laugh it off. Mom, we have a schedule to keep, he joked, reaching for the pen again. Watch the screen, Sylvia commanded. The massive projection screen behind the stage, which had been displaying the Glassbird logo, flickered. The logo vanished. In its place, a spreadsheet appeared. The room went quiet. It was not a marketing slide. It was a raw banking ledger. At the top, in bold letters, it read, Morrow Ridge Strategies, LLC, incoming wire transfers. I saw Megan freeze. I saw Graham's smile falter. The rows began to scroll. September 1st, $5,000. October 1st, $8,000. November 1st, $12,000. The total at the bottom was over $600,000. Then, the screen changed again. It showed the system logs from 20 minutes ago. User M. Klein. Action delete. Target General Ledger 2024. Status failed. Mirror active. Gasps erupted from the front row. The investors were not stupid. They knew what a deletion log looked like. They knew what embezzlement looked like. Graham turned to Sylvia, his face draining of color. Mom, what is this? Turn it off. But Sylvia did not turn it off. She pressed a button on a small remote she had concealed in her palm. The audio filled the ballroom. It was grainy, but the voices were unmistakable. We create a paper trail. Megan's voice boomed over the speakers. We say she is unstable. We say she has been acting erratically. By the time she realizes what is happening, she will be too busy fighting a felony charge. Make her look like a thief. Graham's voice replied, loud and clear. Then we are the victims. Then we are clean. Graham looked like he had been shot. He backed away from the microphone, his hands trembling. Megan dropped her tablet. It shattered on the stage floor, the sound echoing like a gunshot. That was my cue. I stepped out of the shadows. I walked down the center aisle. I did not run. I did not shout. I walked with the steady, rhythmic pace of a woman who owns the building. The crowd parted for me. I saw shock on their faces, but I also saw respect. I walked up the stairs to the stage. I stood next to Graham. He could not look at me. He was staring at the screen, watching his life disintegrate in high definition. I placed the sealed folder I was carrying on the podium, right on top of the document he had been about to sign. You forgot to mention one asset. Graham, I said into the microphone. My voice was steady. I opened the folder. Miles Corbett stepped up from the front row, flanked by two forensic accountants. This folder contains the deed of incorporation for Janus Ventures. I announced, the parent company you used to hide the stolen money. You thought you controlled it, but you never read the fine print of the trust your mother set up. I turned to look at him. I am the sole beneficiary. Graham, you did not steal the money from me. You just moved it into a savings account that only I can access. Graham looked at Sylvia. She was standing still, her face a mask of tragic resolve. Why, he whispered hoarsely, I am your son. Sylvia finally looked at him. There were tears in her eyes, but they did not soften her gaze. Because you are a thief. Graham," she said, "and I did not raise a thief." Then came the final blow. Miles stepped forward and held up a clear plastic evidence bag. Inside was a stack of cash, part of the bait I had planted 2 hours ago. Miles addressed the room. An individual attempted to retrieve a package of cash from a locker at Union Station. That individual was Ms. Klein's brother. The cash had been treated with a UV reactive marker. He pointed a UV flashlight at Megan's hands. She tried to hide them behind her back, but it was too late. Her fingertips glowed a bright, damning neon blue. She had handled the cash before passing it to her brother. She had touched the bait. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the silence of a guillotine blade hovering at the top of its arc. Sylvia reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. It was the note from the trash bag. She stepped to the microphone one last time. "I threw a trash bag at my daughter-in-law 3 days ago." Sylvia read, her voice shaking slightly. "I did it because it was the only way they would believe I hated her, and it was the only way for her to survive long enough to catch them." She looked at me. "I am sorry." "Harper." I looked at Graham. He was alone. The investors were already on their phones, calling their lawyers. The police were entering the back of the ballroom, guided by Miles's security team. Graham looked small. The arrogance was gone, stripped away to reveal the frightened, greedy child underneath. I picked up the folder. "Get out of my company." "Graham," I said. He did not argue. He did not fight. He simply slumped, defeated. As the officers approached him, the lights in the ballroom seemed to get brighter. The air felt cleaner. I looked at Sylvia. She looked tired, aged by 10 years and 10 minutes. "I will need a chief operations officer to help me rebuild," I said to her, loud enough for the board members in the front row to hear. "Someone who knows where the bodies are buried." Sylvia straightened her spine. She wiped her eyes and nodded. "I am available," she said. I looked out at the crowd. The applause started slowly, from Jade in the back corner, and then it grew. It was not polite applause. It was the applause of people who had just witnessed a predator being taken down by the very prey he tried to eat. I took a deep breath. I had lost my husband. I had lost my illusion of a perfect life. But as I stood there, watching the police lead Graham and Megan away in handcuffs, I realized I had found something far more valuable. I had found the truth, and it was worth every single penny. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I really hope you enjoyed this journey of betrayal and justice. Please leave a comment down below and let me know where you are listening from. I would love to hear from you and see how far Harper's story has traveled. If you want more stories like this, please subscribe to the Morgan Revenge Stories channel. Hit that like button and smash the hype button to help this video get recommended to more people. Your support means the world to me. Stay tuned for the next one.